Hello friends, let's understand about the business risk. So what exactly are business risks? Why these risks occur and how we can possibly mitigate or hedge against these risks? Business risk, as the name suggests, fundamentally emanate because you are adopting a specific business strategy. For example, you want to pursue customers in a specific domain or in a particular region. Or let's say because you are in a particular industry or a business environment. For example, you are in banking. Or you follow a specific manufacturing process that is subject to a rigorous regulatory oversight. For example, you are in a pharma business. So by very nature, business risks are difficult to avoid because it's a choice that you make, and these risks are emanating out of conscious business decisions. However, it is possible and it is required that we mitigate these risks to the maximum possible extent. I'll classify business risk into 5 broad categories. One is the strategic risk, the second is the industry risk, third the environmental risk, fourth legal risk, fifth reputation risk. Let's understand each of these categories in detail. First, the strategic risk. Strategic risks are caused by the specific strategy that the business adopts. And it's a very conscious business decision that we are going to, for example, pursue customers in this particular segment. Let's look at cloud kitchens as an example. So cloud kitchens are designed to serve the customers through certain food delivery channels like Swiggy and Zomato. So by its very nature, they are dependent on these delivery channels to a very large extent. If the delivery channels increase their fees, for example, from 30 to 40%, the cloud kitchens have to take a hit on their margins. YouTube creators who are partnering with YouTube to create the content, they have to abide by the rules of YouTube. So they are taking that risk consciously because they have chosen the strategy to offer their creation through YouTube. Banks, or for example payment banks in specific, payment banks are under a specific set of regulations where RBI approved payment banks to be set up. Now there are certain limitations of payment banks. For example, they cannot give loans. Now consciously the promoters have decided to set up payment banks, and therefore they have to take those specific risks. How can you mitigate this kind of risk? One is to diversify business. For example, a payment bank, if it so thinks and it is capable, it can apply for a regular banking license, and if it complies with the conditions, they can diversify their business. Or a cloud kitchen can set up, for example, restaurants also, and then they can de-risk from the dependence on the delivery platforms. So it is possible to mitigate the strategic risk also to a certain extent, mainly through diversification of business or delivery channels. The second important business risk is the industry risk. As the name suggests, the industry risk arises from being in a specific industry. For example, you are in pharma, or you are in banking, or you are in construction industry. So industry has certain inherent characteristics and the industry faces certain risks. For example, steel and cement industries are considered cyclical. Also, these are focused on infrastructure. Their consumers are mainly into construction industry, let's say power, utilities, road building, etc. So any slowdown in construction is directly going to impact the steel and cement industries. Also, they consume a lot of power. So any increase in the energy prices will impact them. So how do you mitigate against the industry risk? You can diversify. For example, apart from being in a specific industry, you can have additional products and services, or you can export. For example, if the domestic market is cyclically down, prices are less for your finished product, then you can export. Or you can, for example, import your raw materials from global sources if the raw material prices are higher within the economy. Other way of handling industry risk is to go and capture the upstream value chain. For example, if you are in aluminium, then you can produce aluminium utensils. So you are capturing the value chain of utensils also. If you are in cement, you can also get into construction in partnership with construction companies, so that you are assured of the uptake of the produce that you are producing. So there are ways of managing industry risk as well. The third important business risk is environmental risk. Environmental risk, as we know, is discussed quite a lot nowadays. It arises from a specific manufacturing or delivery process. For example, inherently we know that the chemical industry, petroleum industry has a large human as well as ecological impact. People working in chemical industries might suffer certain diseases. Also, it can impact the ecology through the pollutants that they throw out. So these are difficult to avoid if you are consciously in that particular industry. Obviously, the pollution is going to be caused to a certain extent, but you can manage the risk by deploying better and better technology, which is controlling the pollution creation, as well as, for example, purifying the water before it is being thrown into or released into the rivers. So we can do that using technology. For example, oil production inherently involves the environmental impact, minerals mining involves the environmental impact, and so does the nuclear power. So you can use green technology to a very large extent, which will reduce the carbon emissions, as an example, or chemical effluents. You can do forest plantation along with, let's say, your mines, or along with any kind of a power plant or a nuclear plant, to reduce the impact. You can do the impact assessment and look at how you can reduce the impact of a particular plant being set up. Or you can buy carbon credits, at least to offset the impact on the environment to a certain extent. The fourth business risk is a legal risk. Legal risk arises from the legal environment in which you work. For example, if you are working, you are a company set up in India, but you have customers in US. So your customers can even file the damages or cases against you in US and hold you liable for all the claims that they are going to lodge in the courts in US. So you have to have very good contract drafting. You need to understand the local laws where you are operating, and you need to be very well conscious about the legal frameworks in those countries or regions, and you should have lawyers who back you up and who will be able to protect you from any kind of legal risk. You can avoid certain deals. For example, you may not want to get into certain deals if you feel a lot big legal risk. You can, of course, get the contracts reviewed by the legal experts. You can buy insurance, for example, in some cases, like doctors, for example, buy the malpractice insurance. So, if the patient sues them and there is a negligence on their part, or even without negligence, if something happens to the patient, in that case, they are reimbursed by the insurance companies. The fifth important business risk is the reputational risk. So as we know, reputational risk will arise from certain kind of transactions that might harm your reputation or might sort of erode the trust of your customers and other stakeholders. So it is important in most of the businesses that the customers and other stakeholders have sort of trust in you. And it is, for example, very important in certain businesses like jewelry business, for example, in banking, in insurance business, and so on and so forth. So any kind of mainstream media exposure or social media exposure where, for example, there is a negative sort of publicity for you can hugely impact the public trust, and it can erode your reputation. How do you mitigate the reputational risk? Obviously, you have to make sure that you deal with your customers and other stakeholders fairly, and you have to also actively monitor the mainstream media, social media. You should be careful in handling the customer complaints. For example, if the customer has suffered a damage, you might want to reimburse the expenses to the customer, maybe meet them, talk to them. Any kind of grievances that the counterparties have, I think you should proactively handle them. And also you should make sure that you are in alignment with the mainstream media and align your media spend accordingly. So understanding these 5 elements of business risk will help you understand each of these risks in detail, also mitigate or manage this exposure to these kind of risks, and also plan your career in the risk management as a domain. So I hope you found this video useful. If yes, please do like this video, share with your friend, and also subscribe to my channel. Thank you very much, and cheers.